The first in our food and drink webinar series. Just a couple of housekeeping points before we start. This is a live session and we have a Q&A going through the whole session, so feel free to post your questions. Have a look upon the toolbar if you can't see the live Q&As coming up, and if you'd like to, please tell us your company and where you're from, and if you're happy, then we'll say that too. So I'm Fleur Lewis. I'm a partner at Bishop Fleming and head of our food and drink. I'm working from home today in my slightly rustic office, and the children are on red warning not to come in today, so I'm hoping for no interruptions. And I'm here with Nick Sprague. Morning, Nick.
Good morning. I'm speaking to you from a rather damp Edford, just outside of Topsham. A little bit, yeah, the nice weather's a little bit behind us, but hopefully it's coming back.
Excellent. So so Nick is our guest this morning. So the whole event this morning, just a little conversation with Nick, just to get his thoughts on the world as it is right now. But just before we go into that, lots of you will know Nick anyway, but in terms of just background, so Nick is well known in food and drink. He started selling fruit from a vegetable store at a market shop, and grew that business into an international brand that's since sold to an even larger brand. He's still involved in that company, but he spends his time mentoring and investing in other food and drink businesses. So perhaps, Nick, you could just expand on that for us.
Lovely. Yeah, thanks, Fleur. So much of my day to day is with the Cobell business based in Exeter, with our offices also up in Bishop Stortford. We are a food ingredient specialist business, and we're now part of a much bigger group called Simrise, big German PLC, a big Goliath, 9,000 staff, over 150 countries, and we cover the whole spectrum of flavour and food ingredients, from everything from perfume at one end, toilet duck at the other end in that sort of sector, all the way through snacks and beverages and culinary and sweet teas, etc. So a very, very big portfolio, and my role more or less day to day for them is the business development role, working with food and drink manufacturers as an ingredient supplier.
Excellent. So I guess you've said where you're working from today. We're obviously in this new environment now, but how is business?
So with my Cobell Simrise hat on, as always, we've had sort of winners and losers, and I'm sure we'll touch a bit more on that as we go through today. We very much have been busy in areas that we've all been seeing in the news, certain food products that have been more popular, some of the more staple products. Of course, on the detrimental side, we've seen a big step down in what I would call the on-trade sector. So anything that was destined to be made for pubs or restaurants at the moment is, as you can imagine, it's pretty difficult, and we don't quite know when that might end. So we're pretty balanced. Yeah, so overall, we're probably at about the same levels we should be with regards to productivity and profits, but that's helped a lot by the broad portfolio. Mm-hmm. If I turn my attention a little bit more with my Frobis's hat on, I'm not a day-to-day executive in that business, but very, very close to it. That's been much more. We've had to be much quicker in our planning. Like a lot of people in that sector, we've had to furlough our staff. We've had to look really carefully at where our cash is going and what we're doing, and the team there have done a really, really good job. I think one of the big pluses, and all credit to the team, is that we didn't furlough our credit controller, and she's done a really good job at collecting in the money, and cash will be king. So that was one of the big pluses. I think that we got that right. And we've been able to put the business into a little bit of hibernation, whilst at the same time exploring what we do online. So we're now available on Amazon, on eBay and other platforms to try and fill some of the gap that we're not obviously seeing through the on-trade sector. But yeah, it's much reduced business. It's nothing like it was pre-lockdown, and that'll be the same for others.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of businesses have had to be quite agile, I guess, in terms of adapting to that online presence. Was that a difficult transition?
I think, like everybody, we're all starting cold, weren't we? It's not like anybody had the sort of heads up that this is what it was going to look like. And actually, as we already start to look back a little bit, I'm pretty impressed of how all the sector has really come together to make things work. A good example, I think, of where we were pretty brave and bold, but we were helped by the customers. With my sort of Cobell hat on, we started to do NPD, but using Zoom and Teams, with regards to the fact that we still sent samples out. The only difference being, instead of normally maybe getting together to talk through how those ingredients had worked, we did it all virtually. So the samples arrived still through the couriers. They made them into the products, whatever they were doing at their end, and we did that sort of analysis all virtually. And actually, it's worked so well. I think that'll be much more the norm. I think at times that will be, it's better than getting an email response, because you get to see the whites of each other's eyes and get the sort of body language. So I think that will be a way forward that's an improvement of what we did before.
And what do you think some of the biggest lessons learned have been during this time?
Personally, I think the way that we work with our teams, how we utilise that skill set and how we apply it. And I think there will be, for both sides, both for employers and employees, I think a big discussion to come will be working from home. It's always been it's not been the elephant in the room, and different companies have different mindsets about it and have had pre-lockdown. Some companies are a little bit more structured, and maybe, let's just say, a little bit more old-fashioned, and they like to see their workforce at their desk 9 to 5. Others have been more perhaps IT competent to a certain degree and have been more flexible in the way they work with their teams. But this has kind of forced the working from home. And of course, for the majority of people, it's worked really well. Not for everybody, and we've got the same in our big team. We have got certainly some people that are really missing the interaction in the office environment, and others that are saying, oh, this works well with my particular lifestyle as I have now. So I think the working from home whole subject will continue in earnest, where HR departments, employers and employees will have to be, I think, more conciliatory in how that works going forward, and what flexibility is there. Because surely I don't see a mass return to work in the way that we saw pre-lockdown, and I don't think that's what the government wants either. And they're going to unfold, I suppose, more of the plan. So yeah, I think that's going to be the interesting one: how businesses adapt, and what are the pros and cons of that. If you're a big commercial landlord with lots of offices in city centres, that may not be such a great sign that companies won't need that space or as much space. So that's definitely one I think that'll continue for a longer time.
And across your you're involved in quite a lot of different food and drink businesses in the sector. What kind of opportunities have you seen?
I think definitely the online presence will change and be ramped up. A lot of companies have had traditional routes to market. I mean, with my Frobish's hat on, talking there, we are predominantly on trade, restaurant led. We have got some retail business. I'm sure, like a lot of other businesses, they'll look at what makes up their mix, where does their revenue come from. So I think the opportunities will be there to say, yes, we've got this opportunity now to exploit other areas, and how does that work within your existing structures. So I think there are definitely going to be opportunities. As always, there's going to be some immediate quick wins and some longer burns. I do think at the moment the real standout losers, to be quite blunt, will be anything around hospitality, travel, anything to do with that sort of pub and retail sort of sector that relies on people coming in. I just think that's going to roll for a little bit longer, and that's going to be difficult because we have our summer just about starting now. And if that sector, for the pub sector, goes through until September or into the autumn winter, that's often the time when they're in a loss leading time anyway. The summer is where they make their money. But hopefully we can come up with some structures there. So I think they're the ones that are probably in the tightest spot right now.
Yeah. No, it's difficult, particularly for the Southwest as well.
Yeah, I think one thing that's been maybe a little bit naive on my part, but it's been very interesting, even from the big companies, your BAs, your Virgins, lots of other companies, especially for us locally on the back of the Flybe sort of debacle and Flybe going, and then we went, you know, where we are now. The sort of the kind of resilience and the cash position for a lot of businesses, you don't have to go many weeks without the normal revenue lines before things really start to get really difficult. And I'm sure there are a lot of FDs out there and people that are much more expert in this area than me that will be looking at how do we get that better going forward, because this is definitely an unprecedented time. That word's been used so much, I'm trying not to use it myself, but it is a very difficult time. It won't perhaps be the only time that we have something like this maybe going forward in this type of world that we are in now. So how do you get better at being more resilient when these bumps in the roads come? Because it just seems so quickly how things really start to, you know, fall apart for these bigger companies and SMEs.
Absolutely, yeah. The brands of yesterday are not necessarily the brands of the future. No,
and that will continue, I think. Yeah, I mean, reading a little bit today, some of the news from some of the other analysts out there, this is kind of, we think we've dug reasonably deep already. I think the coming out of furlough will be now the real test, won't it? And it's going to test us all, and lifestyles and habits are going to change. And it's going to be a bit of a long haul. I don't think this is a short-term bounce back. This will take some time. And then what are the financial aspects of what might be the longer term? Because the government have been, everyone I've spoken to has said actually on the furlough scheme, and when they put in their applications, HMRC, etc., have been really good. That's one, you know, to give them their credit, that apparently the money's coming through. The grants and the furloughing scheme have been really good. That's wonderful. The government's been the systems have been there for us, but there's going to be a payback. And I've got no crystal ball on that like anybody else, but the war chest coffers will be slightly depleted, and they'll need to be topped back up to obviously get us in a position as a country that we can withstand other things that might come. So I'll be interested to see, you know, how that looks in terms of VAT changes, tax changes, both individually and from a corporate perspective. And you must be asked this a lot, I expect.
Yeah, and it's quite hard to have a crystal ball, but when the furlough in theory comes to an end at the end of June, then yeah, I guess what are your thoughts in terms of what might happen then?
I suppose that's the real pinch point for a lot of employers, where the furlough scheme has been great, and for some of the people out there that have been furloughed, for a lot it's still been very difficult, because of course it was 80% to a maximum of £2,500 a month, you know, before tax. For some, you know, that would have been, you know, actually 80% of their normal pay, and they've been able to find some other things to keep them occupied whilst financially being okay. Others will have not been quite so okay. The big pinch point I think coming is at the end of that government assistance, financial assistance. What does that look like for some of the businesses when it comes back to their payroll and their cash position? Are they able to resume normal services, or are they going to have to look creatively at part-time, flexi time, or God forbid, is it time to let people go and make them, you know, redundant because they don't have the income or the work to come through? So this is what I think, you know, some of these more specialist analysts are saying. We're at the start of probably the really hard bit now as we come out of this furlough scheme in the next couple of weeks.
And obviously, if staff have demonstrated that they can successfully work at home, you know, what are employers gonna say?
You know, with a slightly sort of, you know, mischievous hat on, it's going to be an interesting discussion, isn't it? Because if your company's perspective was no, we're quite, you know, keen that you're in at the office and this is your place of work, all of a sudden they were thrust a laptop and given some IT support and asked to do that job from home. And from what I'm hearing and seeing from other people I talk to daily, that's worked really well. Well, it's got to be a grown-up conversation about what that looks like going forward. I don't think you can come through whatever the return to work furlough looks like and almost insist that person A comes back to their desk, because by that point we could be into 9-10 weeks of working successfully from home that might suit that person that wants to continue. So I think that'll be there'll be more open-mindedness to it, I believe, going forward, would be my thought. Yeah.
And obviously, you know, there are quite a lot of food and drink businesses that have continued, you know, to produce food for us all. And actually, I think it's quite remarkable about how much food there actually is available after the initial panic. So some food and drink businesses will be quite used to having, I guess, people in their factories.
Yes.
And it's going to be quite interesting to see what the government says in terms of easing of the lockdown and how that is going to impact those on the factory floor.
I think with our own experiences with our factory in Marsh Barton, we went into a slightly different shift system where we had distinct shift staff working in that pattern, so we didn't get the normal crossover that we would have with a bit of flexibility and people swapping around. So we were able to, we're a 2-shift system, we've been able to run that successfully. I think actually they're also one of those, not trying to make any comparison at all to the frontline staff NHS, but I think people that have been in food factories through this period really, you know, deserve a lot of credit, because they've done really, really well. And like you say, we haven't had any shortages or issues. And it's been, now I think it's gone back to quite a normal pattern. The chief guy at Tesco's was saying we're seeing a resurgence back to what was the weekly shop. So rather than people perhaps shopping bits and bobs every other day or nipping in on the way from home, they've got more used to doing that weekly shop. So that's interesting. But yeah, we're seeing plentiful supply of all things that we need, and that's good, and they're to be congratulated on that.
On that weekly shop thing, the other day I did an online click and collect, and I hadn't appreciated you can only have 80 items. So when I had 150 in my basket and then had to reduce it down to 80, it took just as long to remove them as it did to put them in there.
My slight faux pas, I said, right, I'm going to go and get a few bits and pieces and the essentials. I was running a little bit low of beer. So I thought I'd go and do a little bit of an alcohol shop and everything else. Went to the big Tesco's at Ryden Lane here in Exeter. And as I got there, I thought, well, there's not much of a queue at all. That looks pretty good. I walked down to the dual exited fronted shop, and where I was walking to was basically the exit. As I turned the corner, they were queuing right the way around the car park in like a Disney themed sort of queue. And I thought, and one guy said it was about an hour, and I thought, oh no. So I waited and went a bit later. But yeah, that was my only. I thought it's not too bad at all. Bloody queuing right around the car park. Yeah,
and I think they expect that to continue for some time too.
Yeah, but again, people have been pretty good when I've been in, you know, that 2-meter distancing and a real, I'm not a mask wearer currently. I mean, that might be changing when they perhaps enforce it, but it's about half and half. I notice when you are in the shops, about half the people in there, as in the general public shopping rather than the staff, are wearing masks. So yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Which goes back to the whole, you know, what does life look like? Can you imagine sitting in the pub beer garden with your mask on and lifting it up to have a sip of your beer? I mean, oh, yeah, hopefully not.
Are they wearing masks and PPE in your, I assume they are in the factory, are they?
They have a certain amount of that anyway, being a food factory. So typically it was if you had facial hair, if you had a beard or something, you would normally wear a beer snood, but we wear hair nets and everything anyway. So adding for everybody to wear a mask has just become the new norm. So yeah, and we haven't had any real issues getting hold of that PPE through the normal supply routes, but we're not a huge manufacturing staff. So when you talk about buying PPE for sort of 12 people, it's not so bad. So that's been fine. We haven't had any issues there.
Nick, I've got a few questions coming in, and I guess just thinking back to Cobell and the parent company, you know, owned by a German company. Has this led to, has this had any bearing on your approach to handling the coronavirus in the UK?
I was chatting to some of the team, the production team, literally yesterday, Monday, but I popped in to see them. I pop in to see them from a morale point of view and catch up with them. And one of the big benefits of being part of a really big, well-structured German company is the fact that I alluded to that we have about 9,000 staff worldwide. I don't have the exact figures, but we're talking probably less than 100 people worldwide have been furloughed. And that's the kind of strength and depth you get sometimes with a much bigger company. And if I'm candid, I think if I go back to when we were Cobell as a partnership, myself and the other 3 partners, and we've gone into this crisis as an independent, privately owned SME, I suspect we might have had to furlough a lot more. Staff of roughly 60. I guess in the old days, we probably might have had to have furloughed half. So that's one big difference I noticed when you have that strength and depth of a well-heeled big company, that they have the spread of revenue and customers to even out some of these bumps. And it's not without some pain, but some other sectors, as I said before, are up. So they've been able to weather it well. It will perhaps change as we go through the next phase, but that's one of the big differences. Yeah, that's been a real benefit, because furloughing staff is not easy and not nice all round. So yeah, that's been one of the differences. Yeah. And I expect the Germans are pretty organised, so they were pretty on to the plans and how everything would work, and that's worked well for us.
And obviously, with the whole coronavirus been having such a global impact, has there been any impact on your supply chain?
We've not had what I'd call real problems, but we have had some delays on raw materials through what has been obviously the export process, the shipping and the transportation. A lot of our goods come in by sea, and a lot still comes in via things like ferry ports and also the Eurotunnel. And on the whole, that's been pretty good. So marginal, small delays rather than anything too catastrophic. And again, flip side, working with our shift system for our customers, we've been able to pretty much keep up with what they've wanted. If anything, we might have a day or two slight difference in our normal patterns. But no, on the whole, actually, supply chain wise, we've been very fortunate. And I don't know behind the scenes how government and other bodies have made that work, but we certainly haven't had big delays at the ports. No, it's been okay.
And then just thinking back to that kind of local, and thanks Ian from our chair, we've got a question here, but people appear to have really appreciated local supplier and growers for their food. Is this something that you see continuing?
I think definitely one of the local companies here that we have is a company, Dart Fresh, who are in the local area. They were predominantly, I believe, supplying the restaurant trade with fresh produce, as well as some selections of meats and other products. They've very quickly adapted to the online shopping opportunities for straightforward Joe public consumers, and they put together a really good site, and we, fun enough, as a family have been using them, and that's been really good. And it's nice to think that you're doing something local, and it's a bit old-fashioned greengrocery. The products arrive in brown paper bags and other bits, like the oldie worldy day of going down to the greengrocer or to the butchers. So I think there will be a little bit more. We've been quite good, especially in the southwest. I think we are quite good at being more artisan in some of our choices. I think that will continue. As always, you've got to balance it up against obviously some of the difference in cost. So I suspect between the big retailers, the Tesco, Sainsbury's, Asda's, and local, people will probably change their habits a little bit. Yeah.
Slightly different question here for you on insurance, and yeah, just saying that so many policies have business interruption cover, but only for known causes. And with COVID being a new virus, have you had any experience in terms of claims or feedback from insurance companies?
A little bit, and don't claim to be at all an expert, but talking to some of our customers, some have had some cover confirmed by their insurer and underwriter that they will have some cover. Often, as always, there's an upper limit, so it's not an open-ended sort of claim. And others, the wording in their documents have been quite specific. If it's not a named disease or a named reason, then no. So I think that's again going to throw up more sort of questions going forward, that perhaps companies going forward with their broker to say, right, we got caught out by having interruption insurance, but it didn't cover us for COVID-19 because it was a new disease. With my renewal policy, I'd like that to be incorporated, whatever that new disease might be, because already people are saying, you know, you might have a COVID-20 or something similar. So that's going to be, again, another interesting sector, isn't it? The insurance companies, some that have paid, some that haven't. And of course, everyone going forward will go, well, I'd like to have cover. I'd like to be covered in this situation going forward. So it's a bit like flood insurance, isn't it? You know, it's not that easy because it can be really expensive for the underwriters. So I've heard mixed things, not many, I would say. If I had to put a figure to it, about 10% of the people I'm talking to say they've had some cover under interruption insurance that their underwriter will pay, and others have said definitely not, it's not covered.
Yeah. And in terms of the food and drink sector, and I guess Southwest or I guess across the UK, have you seen much in terms of consolidation or M&A activity? I guess people taking opportunities.
I haven't seen, I'm sure that there are, obviously like everything, there's a pipeline of deals going on, aren't there? And I'm sure some will have completed and perhaps things have perhaps stalled, but I don't think we're at the point yet of seeing anything happen outside of the norm. I did see that there was a big pub group that I think Enterprise Inns last year agreed to sell 4,000 pubs to Stonegate, and I believe that did go through all the normal monopolies, mergers, sort of protocols, and completed, I think, in early March, just before lockdown. So if that is correct, I've got that right, that must be quite an interesting situation for the new owners to have, you know, taken on 4,000 establishments that are then closed. So that must be interesting to watch on, again, in that on-trade sector. I do think there might be some more comings together in the months ahead where businesses perhaps look at their model and go, this isn't quite sustainable, and similar businesses might have a similar outlook that go, oh, hang on a minute, is there ways that we might do things more joint venture or come together more formally? So I suspect there'll be some interesting thoughts around that area, and unfortunately, of course, there will be businesses that don't survive, and administrations, I'm sure, will probably go up as things start to bite financially. So that always leads to opportunities that you know, companies perhaps before getting to that final part might be able to do something with others. So yeah, not going to be a dull day in that area. No.
So in terms of, I guess, advice or thoughts for businesses, I guess particularly in the region, did you have any other thoughts?
I think the food and drink industry is a friendly industry. It is competitive. It is pretty cutthroat at times, but actually the overarching theme with most brands and producers, we're kind of all it's a very constant thing. Eating and drinking is constant, and we have a good camaraderie on the whole. So I suspect there will be more leaning into some of the associations and some of the more formal and informal clubs that exist for owners to get together, a little bit of Chatham House rules to say, God, I'm really struggling with this, how are you coping with that? And I think leaning on each other a little bit will be good. It will make people explore. I think we're going to be more innovative. You know, I don't think when times are good, you can slip into being less entrepreneurial in some ways. I suspect now there'll be no stone unturned where there is a bit of spare capacity if perhaps revenue lines are down, to say, how do we streamline this business? How do we look at different ways of doing things? You know, the transportation of goods, everything I think will come a little bit more under the spotlight, and it's a chance for, as we, like any business, you know, no one's got a monopoly on good ideas. I think there'll be more encouragement to staff throughout the whole mantra of you know, from the ground floor up, to say, come on, we've all had a bit of thinking time in this process. If you thought of anything, it doesn't matter if it's a little bit left of field, come on, what is it? And I suspect that will be encouraged more. So that's quite exciting. I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. Slightly off topic, but what's your thoughts on what will happen to season ticket holders if the balance of the remaining matches are not played?
Yeah, that's one of the things that during this period I've been. I'm a big rugby fan, big Chiefs fan. Love rugby. I like football when it's played well and everything else. I think it's a fantastic game. What I've always found a bit of a struggle with the football side is the monetary side. As a business person, I'm thinking, you have players that you've signed. For whatever reason, you don't play them, but you're still paying them £250,000 a week to sit on the subs bench. Outside of all the sponsorship and TV rights, it's such a big animal to feed, isn't it? So right now, that's going through its own pain threshold. So at a more modest level, rugby, will we go back? The French have already said they're not interested in doing anything on their soil with regards to matches until September. So the Heineken Champions Cup now, quarterfinals, etc., won't really happen, if they happen at all, until at least September. The more it goes on, the more I feel whatever happens to finish the season won't be the norm. Is it the Twickenham experience where they'll schedule 2 or 3 games during the week and it'll be behind closed doors but with cameras? And I suspect that's probably more like it. But if they don't play it out and they bring down the sort of, the end and say, right, we're finishing the season, it depends where clubs are financially. I mean, if you're a season ticket holder and you're owed games and the club came to you and said, if we give you all a refund, probably means we're going to put ourselves in a real financial deep hole. Could we work with you on finding a way to get you recompense for that over a longer period, over the next couple of seasons? I think it would come down to a little. I think they should engage with the fans and see where people sit and see what fits for everybody. If you've paid the money for the season ticket, the money's gone. If it can be recompensed in some ways, then that's great. But you've got to work with your club. If you're passionate about your club, you don't want to put them under any more pressure than necessary. But I hope we get some sport back. But who knows? Who knows? It's too early, isn't it? It's too early to tell.
Absolutely. And as you said earlier, you have to take it day by day at the moment because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
No. And there's been quite a lot of online talk about, football is pretty close contact. Rugby is very close contact, especially for the forward players. And, we don't have a vaccine imminent. God forbid, a player gives it to another player and that player becomes seriously ill. There has ramifications to bringing people that closely together. So they won't rush it back. And it was nice to see that. I see that Bill Beaumont was carrying on as rugby's president, and he's 68 now, I believe, and he's a safe pair of hands. I think it's a chance to re-evaluate the calendar. That's a big talking point. Re-evaluate how it all works. Let's wait and see. As always, some good will definitely come from it. Yeah.
It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah. And it's evolving, isn't it? And again, this is something that I'm picking up on. There's probably lots of business owners out there now kind of going, okay, plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E. You got to kind of play the ball in front of you. I think that's my personal thought, is you've got to take it each day, each week as it comes, be very aware of what's coming in the background, but you've got to stay quite focused, I think, on the here and now. Business is a very emotive, feely, touchy thing, and I think you can't spend all your time strategizing on what might be. You've got to play literally, as it comes day by day, and let's see what obviously comes out of the next briefing from the government on the restriction lift. Yeah,
I think that's wise words, Nick. Thank you. We've got a few other questions, and I think what we'll do is wrap them up and hopefully circulate those out. So I guess just want to say thank you very much to Nick for the conversation today. It's absolutely fascinating to hear from you. We're about to launch a new piece on our website, so business after COVID. So trying to look forward. So please do go to our website and have a look. There should be lots of insight and interesting articles on there. We are running this as a series, so in 2 weeks' time we will be chatting with Carl Tucker from Yo Valley, so please look out for your invite on that. And just to say thank you very much for joining us. Please take care, and we look forward to seeing you again in whatever format that is soon. So thank you, and thanks to you, Nick.
No, thank you.
Goodbye.